What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Lithography. I'm Kramzer here with my esteemed colleagues of musical appreciation, Joseph Steigerwald and Jason Reese. We are tackling a loaded year, depending on how you look at it, 1994, counting down our favorite albums of the year. What's going on in 94 in the world and the country? You get the big Republican revolution and Congress. Great year for movies. Lion King wins the box office. Forrest Gump. Shawshank Redemption comes out, which will rerun on TNT every 30 seconds for the rest of eternity. Pulp Fiction, the Three Colors series. It's so many great. But we're not here to talk about movies. We're here to talk about music. But let's start with some movies because it's a big year for music soundtracks with The Crow, Forrest Gump, Reality Bites soundtrack is big. Elton John has a little bit of a comeback with some big hits off the Lion King soundtrack. Notable stuff going on album-wise. Jar of Flies by Alice in Chains becomes the first EP to reach #1. Beatles get in the news because the living members reunite to record some of John Lennon's old demos. You got the Hard Rock Cafe debuting in Nevada and a big concert that kind of marks that. Selena is the first representative of Tejano music to win a Grammy. The Fillmore reopens in San Francisco, and the Smashing Pumpkins are the first band to play there. Michael Jackson marries Lisa Marie, the strongest marriage in the history of love. Lisa Left Eye Lopes gets mad at Andre Rison and burns his shoes, which turns into burning the mansion. I remember seeing that on the news quite a lot. I believe this is also the year OJ takes off in his Bronco. It is just a huge year. Woodstock 94 is held, giving a lot of idiots the right from their forth to claim it was better than the original Woodstock. Aerosmith becomes the first band to release a song on the internet. The East Coast, West Coast rap war sort of starts with Biggie and Tupac. Some really good albums released in the hip-hop world. Ready to Die by Biggie and Illmatic by Nas. You get a nice fluctuation of the mainstream with some R&B stuff, really sensual Boyz II Men. I love the TLC album that comes out that year. Oh yeah, and Kurt Cobain is dead. That's the big story of 1994. There's so many albums to list, but it's really remarkable at how almost every noteworthy grunge alternative rock act in the 90s released something this year. Almost everybody. Green Day, Nirvana had their big Unplugged album, which is probably my favorite piece of Nirvana music. It's probably my favorite album of Nirvana. We don't really count live stuff, but if I was being honest. And I think the thing that's really, really noteworthy here when you go down best of lists, released lists, pop charts, synth is pretty much gone. It has gotten all back to guitars, to hip hop. It is just totally different from where the mid 80s was. And that was just kind of the way the culture changed. I'm not going to get in and start listing all the albums because I think we're going to have them, a lot of them on our stuff. Probably big albums that we won't have. You know, you've got like even bands like Bush, 16 Stone had like a huge album out that year. It's probably the most popular that the alternative and grunge sound will get. So for me personally, wasn't quite as deep as 93, but the ones at the top are almost just as good. I think 93 just had more contenders, not better contenders. But let's see what you guys think. Who's leading it on?
All right, 94 was tough, man. I have 13, 14 albums that made my initial cut down list. A lot of ones that I thought, and you might be surprised to not see them on my list. Purple from SDP didn't make it. Vitology from Pearl Jam, This Perfect World from Freddie Johnson, Royal Jelly, Uncle Dan, probably his best album. His second band after Kingdom Come. Unfortunately, he kind of got lost in the grunge world, but it's great. If you haven't heard it, check out Royal Jelly by Royal Jelly. Also, not quite making it, and I don't know how people are going to feel about this band, but he's going to pop up again. I got Under the Table and Dreaming from Dave Matthews Band, their debut. Probably their best album, but it just couldn't make it here in 94.
Oh, that's so sad.
I know. So don't worry, he'll be back. He'll make my list one day. But the top five, whew, it was tough to get these down. Grace by Jeff Buckley, just phenomenal debut, just runs the gamut from, hard rock of something like Eternal Life to his cover of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. Just such range, he was so good at everything. And it sucks that, we only got the one album from him because he could have been an all-timer. Also on my list, I have Throwing Copper from Live. Early Live does not get the respect it deserves. This album is phenomenal. It's sort of kind of like a U2 situation where you'd kind of turn into sort of, a parody of his early work, but I think they just kill it on this one. All the singles, Selling the Drama, Lightning Crashes, but, the album cuts, Horse, White Discussion, Iris, Top, Waitress, all just really good. I can see why people don't like Ed Kowalczyk, but I really like his, very emotional, sort of semi-religious lyrics and singing. So Throwing Copper makes my list. Also on my list, the number one selling EP, Jar of Flies. We talked about if this was going to be allowed, but it's like 30 minutes long. If it had been a full album, it probably would have won this year, but there's only like 7 songs. It's too short, but I love it. No Excuses, I Stay Away, sort of in the late 90s got me back into music. I believe I Stay Away was the reason I downloaded Napster. Very kind of big album for me. Also, runner up, I got Super Unknown from Soundgarden. Yeah, I know. So what will be number one? Spoon Man, Fell in Black Days, just a killer list. My Wave, awesome song. Phenomenal album. Chris Cornell sounds amazing. Kim Thale, very cool, different kind of playing. Matt Cameron, can't say enough good things about him. And also Ben Shepherd, don't want to forget Ben Shepherd on bass. Just a great album. But my number one is, what is it? No, it's not. In fact, I totally forgot to even mention Weezer. Didn't make the list. Number one, I got to fly all the way to Britain for, they say the big Battle of Britpop was 95. No, it was one in 94. Blur's Parklife is going to be my winner for 1994. Just a phenomenal album. 93, Blur kind of, they'd always kind of been a singles band. They hadn't made that album yet. Released a bunch of great singles, even from, I believe, 91 or 92. 93 was Modern Life is Rubbish, For Tomorrow. Great single. Album couldn't quite, not on the same level. 94, Parklife, just, a pastiche of these little kind of British characters from sort of the synth pop throwback of Girls and Boys, which I love to lead off the album. Parklife, Tracy Jacks, Trouble in the Message Center, they're kind of bouncing around all these different sort of British genres, and it all works. When they sort of really dive into the Britishness, the Britpopness on something like To the End and This Is a Low, End of a Century, it just works great. Damon Albarn, he's kind of hit or miss, but I think he really kind of pulls it all together on this. Great guitar work from Graham Coxon, Alex James, underrated bass player, David Roundtree, good drummer too, and just the songs are great. They're super catchy, super memorable, and I think it's kind of the pinnacle of Britpop. A little surprising maybe, I went away from the American alternative scene, but something about that Britishness always gets me, especially lately. So I got to give it to Parklife, 1994's best album for me.
That is shocking. To have Throwing Copper, which I also like, and Blur, and not Purple by STP or Vitalogy by Pearl Jam is shocking to me.
I love both of them, I really do, but 94 was just, it's like throwing darts at a dartboard. I could have gone with any of them. It would have been good, but just right this second, little down on STP and even the Blue album. I listened to it a couple times and I was like, well, really like this, but it's just not quite as good as these other ones.
Yeah. Didn't mean to make such a disgusting face when you mentioned Dave Matthews Band, but he did dump his shit from his tour bus on my city like 10 years ago. So wait, real quick, let's have a little side discussion here for that same kind of style for that mid-90s college jangle rock. I want to get Jason's input on this because I will take Cracked Rearview Mirror by Hootie over Dave Matthews Band. But I want to get Jason to weigh in on that.
I don't know about that. No, those couple earlier Dave Matthews records aren't that bad.
The playing is phenomenal on him. I understand why people don't like Dave Matthews, but I love the violin, the sax. Before they got, I mean, they kind of get jammier later, but I've never been to Dave Matthews concert. They were definitely one of the first kind of bands I really liked growing up. A lot of these, all these artists I came to like much later, but I don't know. I don't mind Dave. People don't like Dave. Usually that's their big problem with the band, but I don't mind him. I think the rest of the band really just kicks butt.
The band is definitely awesome, and there are some songs I like here and there. My biggest thing is his voice. I think he's one of the worst singers ever. I don't like the songwriting, and it really bothers me how high he holds his guitar. I don't know why. That's just a little thing just bothers the hell out of me.
All right. 1994. Maybe not quite as strong as 93 for me, but still very, very strong. Tons of really good albums that aren't making my list. Some of those would be Too High to Die by Meat Puppets, Foolish by Superchunk, Purple by STP, Twice Removed by Sloan, Whiskey for the Holy Ghost by Mark Lanigan, Amorica, I think is probably my favorite Black Crowes record. John Henry, probably my favorite They Might Be Giants record. And a special shout out to Light Music for Dying People by Sordid Humor, which is a really great record that's not that well known, band from San Francisco, but it's great. So my top 5 are going to be Vitalogy by Pearl Jam. I think this is a great sort of effort on their part to expand their sound a bit. They incorporate a little more of their punk influence on this record. It's kind of heavy in spots, but also there's some really nice soft moments like Nothing Man and Better Man with really strong songwriting. I think it's a really solid record. Also have Without a Sound by Dinosaur Jr., another great effort from them. This is sort of like their MTV record. I think they really made a push to be a little poppier on their heavier songs, tracks like Feel the Pain and I Don't Think So. Really, we're in the 120 minutes rotation quite a bit back in the day. But the flip of that sort of poppier side is that there's some really nice acoustic, quiet moments on this record that are awesome, like Over Your Shoulder. So another really good one from them. And then I've got Weezer's self-titled Blue album. I love it. It's another one like August and Everything After, where it's basically been in consistent rotation for me since the day I got it. I got it from a friend for my 11th birthday, and so I've been listening to it now for 25 years, and it's always great. My top 2, runner-up is going to be Wildflowers by Tom Petty. Love this record. I mean, it's kind of surprising this late in his career that he was still making records this great. This follows his greatest hits, where you think, well, maybe after that, things are going to tail off a bit, and he'll like settle into his old age and status as a legendary rock superstar. But it's just some of the best songs he ever wrote. Probably the best record that Rick Rubin ever produced. My number 1, though, for the year, got to be Grace by Jeff Buckley. One of my all-time favorite singers, great songwriting. The covers on it are phenomenal interpretations of the originals, just an incredible performance. It's a really one of those records that sort of when you're coming of age that, really, really hits you in the feels, I guess. It's just really, connects with a lot of people, I think. Great record, has stuck with me all these years later, and I love it.
All right. Saw our albums that didn't quite make it for me, made a couple of your lists, like Throwing Copper. I agree. I don't think Early Live gets the appreciation that it deserves just because of how kind of douchey it got later on. Crooked Rain by Pavement didn't make it. There's Nothing Wrong with Love by Built to Spill. Probably my favorite Oasis album, definitely Maybe, although by the time you watch this video, I will have told you already my favorite Oasis album, which probably definitely Maybe. Monster by R.E.M., Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails, Crazy Sexy Cool by TLC, Nas Illmatic. One that I thought Jason might slip in there is 4 by Blues Traveler. But let's get into the ones that did. Vitalogy by Pearl Jam. Agree with everything Jason said about it. Really good songwriting, really nice step in a different direction, which you can, for Pearl Jam's discography, kind of clearly see them go from that into, No Code and Yield after that, getting a little more acoustic and punky at the same time, which is kind of cool. I also have Purple by STP. Maybe some of the best bass playing in the 90s can be found on this album. With Joe on Jar of Flies with Alice in Chains. Easily my favorite stuff from Alice in Chains. A lot different, more restrained, really delicate playing by Jerry on this. Awesome. The harmonies never sounded better, and the strings coming in. I really think I Stay Away has some of my favorite string moments ever in a song. It's fantastic, although in 1995, Tonight by the Pumpkins will contend for my favorite little pieces of string. And then a bit of a sleeper that is going to sneak in is Holiday by the Magnetic Fields as my other one. My true runner-up to this would be Nirvana's Unplugged, but we don't count the live albums. But my clear-cut runaway winner, probably a top 10 of all time, is with Jason, Grace by Jeff Buckley. Real quick, when's the last time me and you shared a winner, Jason?
Fleetwood Mac, probably. Rumors, 77.
Yeah, I think that's true. We may have come close in the 80s with a couple of Cure albums, but yeah, I think that's the first time in a while. Yeah, you guys already talked about it. The first thing that comes to mind is the vocal performance. Just absolutely phenomenal. One of the greatest rock singers of all time because he incorporates so many different things into his singing style. There's a little bit of R&B and gospel, and he really kind of has an operatic approach. He uses his whole body when he sings. He goes nuts. First thing you think of, obviously, the vocals. Tremendously underrated guitarist as well. The riff on Grace is phenomenal. The playing on this album as a whole is fantastic by the band behind them. Drums are great. The drums sound amazing. The mix on the drums are great. Jason said, really good songwriting, really good covers on this. And when it came out, it was such a critical hit, and other musicians just lauded it so much. David Bowie, when it came out, said it was the best album ever made. Bob Dylan said he's one of the best songwriters of the decade. Jimmy Page said it was the best album of the decade. So all of these, legends coming out and just being blown away shows you just the talent and sort of the variety of styles on this that are at the forefront. There's a really nice, just kind of the album's not sad and down in the dumps, but there is kind of an undercurrent of just warning signs of it being kind of toxic and, being kind of, he's being really kind of brave through this depression almost. And you can just kind of feel it in the album just flowing out of his body into the instruments and his vocals. And I think a lot of albums, especially a one-off like this, where there's always some of my favorite albums, there's always this thing where you just can't describe about it. You can't really put your finger on what it is that makes it so different or so unique. And I really feel that way about this album. I think it's beautiful and just really strong too. The strength on this album is awesome. It's a great rock album. It's a great singer-songwriting album. It's so many things. I think other than an obvious Radiohead choice for me later in the year will be my favorite, obviously my favorite album of the 90s, but this is probably a top 10 album for me of all time. It was an easy winner, and I love all those other albums too, but this one takes the cake really easily for so many reasons. Grace by Jeff Buckley. Shout out to Wes Anderson for naming the dog and Royal Tenenbaums Buckley after Jeff. So if you're watching, Wes. Any closing thoughts, guys?
It was a big year for music and America. A lot of stuff happened in '94.
It did. The big one that we didn't really talk about is Winona Ryder getting her first lead actress nomination for Little Women.
That's probably the biggest thing of '94, I would say.
Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody, to Listography, Albums of the Year 94. Let us know in the comments what your favorite are. Some of you will give us a few. Some of you will give us 50 to 60, and we appreciate all of it. So on behalf of Joe and Jason and myself, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check out our social media accounts in the descriptions below. And we will see you in Albums of the Year 1995.